I wrote down here that the topic is about influence. So just write the word influence down. Influence. So one of my mentors said many, many times, and even though I only met him once, it's as if every time that he said this statement, he was saying it directly to me. He said, if you want to get what you want, then you've got to help enough people get what it is that they want. You've heard that before, right? Yes. You've heard it, right?
Yes.
This is a conversation. So that's I'm not Jimmy Kimmel. So you got to, when I ask a question, you got to respond. This is not a monologue. So if you help enough people get what they want, then you will what?
Get what I want.
You'll ultimately get what you want. So what does that imply ultimately?
Giving.
Okay, so giving, all right. Helping others.
Selflessness.
Selflessness, okay.
Empathy.
Yeah. Empathy, okay. Yeah, all great words. And really what that is in terms of mindset, it's about getting out of our own heads and getting into the heads of other people, right? Instead of focusing on ourselves and how we feel, we are then what?
Focus on them.
We're focused on how others feel, which is exceptionally important. So the first word that I wrote down relative to this is leadership. So write that word down, leadership. It's really what that is. It's leadership. Leadership is helping people get what it is that they want. But in order to do that, we have to influence them. I want you to think about that. That's what leadership is. It's influence. Great leadership is influence. Influence to get people to change their perspective, to change their actions, to do something that they wouldn't otherwise have normally or ordinarily done, to enable them to get what it is that they want. I mean, how many of you have ever talked to a stubborn client? If you haven't at this point, you just haven't talked to enough people. It will happen because clients are stubborn because they are what?
Scared.
Well, yes, but it's more based than that. It's because they're what? They're human beings. We are stubborn, right? And they tend to be stubborn, and they think in so many cases that they have it all figured what?
Out.
They've got it all figured out. So despite what you know and the fact that you're the professional, they will oftentimes tell you the way it's going to be, or they're reluctant to do what you're necessarily suggesting that they do. And all of that is about influence. It's all about making certain that we build a certain sense of perception on their part that they're going to be, if somebody feels this word, I'm not going to give it away, if they feel this way, they're more likely to follow you. It's really the number one thing that people, yes, that's the number one thing that people are looking for. People will say that everybody wants to be free. I'm here to argue with you. That's not true. Everybody wants to be safe. And so many people will give up their freedom to be what?
Safe.
To be safe. So gang, I want you to remember this, that as you're going out and prospecting, you're talking to people, whether it's your sphere, Derek, or it's a cold call, an expired or a FSBO, these people ultimately want to feel what?
Safe.
Right. And it's your job as a leader to help them do that. So how do you do that? Because we talked about influence, we talked about leadership, but how do you do that? How do you help people feel safe? What's the number one way that you can do that as a real estate agent?
Knowledge.
Okay. Trust. Okay.
Say the question again.
How do you help people feel safe? What do you?
It's just caring.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's the number one skill of a great leader?
I always
Listening.
compliment.
Listening. And in order to listen, you have to what? You have to ask questions.
Oh,
Yeah, you have to ask questions.
should we write
Okay.
that?
Yes. Yeah, do.
Write everything John Ciet says.
That takes short notes.
Just them to say.
Yeah, it's asking questions. Let me share a story with you that really exemplifies this. It has nothing to do with real estate, and it has everything to do with real estate and with life. And at least 50% of this crowd has heard the story before, but it's a great story that really exemplifies this. So years ago, I took my daughter, who is now 20, to New York. She was 13. And one of the things that I like to do when I take somebody to New York for the first time, it's one of the things I love to do, is take somebody who's never been in New York to see New York, is just to watch their reaction to this amazing experience. And I wanted to take my daughter on the water taxi where you could see New York City and that skyline, the city, all of those buildings from the water. It looks completely different than when you're in the city, right? So my daughter and I are walking over to the area where they sell the tickets for the water taxi. And as we're walking up to the area where the salespeople kind of mill around looking for prospects, a young man notices that we are walking in the right direction, and he approaches us and says, "Are you guys looking to get on the water taxi?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "Great, I can help you with that." And I assumed that because he had a lanyard on, and his name was Anthony. And so I asked him, I said, "Anthony, how long have you been doing this?" And he said, "Oh, a couple of months." I said, "Oh, good for you." And as I'm having this conversation with him, of course, he's asking me questions in terms of, well, which water taxi ticket do we want? Do we want to do the full day or just the one way? What do we want to do? Right. So he's doing his job as a salesperson, but at the same time, I'm having a conversation with him. So I asked him, "How long have you been at the job?" He said, "A couple of months." I said, "Great. Do you like it?" He said, "Yeah, I really like it." I said, "Well, what were you doing before?" And he said, "Well, this is my first job." And I said, "It's your first job? Really?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "How old are you?" And he said, 22. I said, "You're 22 and this is your first job." I said, "You've got some amazing parents who let you get away with that, because there's no way." I mean, like my kid's 15, is like, he's getting a job now, right? So I said, I asked him, I said, "So do you have any siblings?" He said, "Yeah, I've got a younger brother and a younger sister." I said, "Oh, so you're the oldest?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, where are you from?" He said, "Well, I'm from Queens." I said, "You're from Queens? Really? Born and raised?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Wow, that's cool." I said, "Do you enjoy doing that? I mean, growing up in Queens?" And he said, "Yeah, it was okay." And I said, I stood back from him, and I looked at him just up and down. And I said, "You look like you're really, athletic, look like you are in shape." I said, "Do you like to play basketball?" And he said, "Yeah, I like to play basketball." I said, "Oh, good." I said, "Do you think you could beat me?" And so then he took a step back and he kind of sized me up and he said, "Yeah, I can beat you." And we laughed about that. And then he worked on, printing out the tickets. I gave him, my card, and we paid for the tickets. And as he went to hand me the tickets, he pulled them back and he said, "You know what? I'll take you guys over to the dock." Now, where we were, the dock was probably about a 7 or 8 minute walk, which doesn't seem like a very long walk, right? But the water taxi salespeople earn money by selling what? They're not paid on an hourly basis. They're paid on commission based upon the number of tickets that they sell. So Anthony, taking the time to walk us to the dock, he was giving up a sale or two, probably, right? Which I thought was interesting, but he began to walk us over there. What was interesting, though, is that he was walking pretty fast because he wanted to get there, right? Because he knew that he was giving up dollars, but at the same time, he offered to do that. So we're walking along, and I noticed that I'm trying to keep up with him. He's a few steps ahead of me, and my daughter's like 5 or 6 behind me. And I turn around and say, "Caroline, come on, catch up." And I take probably another 10, 15 steps, and she's still behind me. And so I stop and wait for her. I say, "Caroline, come on." And I look at her face, and I can see she's not happy. And I said, "What's going on?" And she looked at me, kind of grimaced, and she made this face. And she kind of like paused, like she was fishing for her words. And she said, you manipulate people." I mean, she yelled it out like that uncontrollably. I looked at her like, "What?" She said, "Yeah, you manipulate people." I said, "What are you talking about?" She said, "Anthony." I said, "Anthony?" She said, "Yeah." She said, "He's walking us over to the dock, to the boat." She said, "You just manipulated him so he would do that." I said, "Really?" I said, "Is that what you think?" She said, "Yeah." And I said, "Hold on, time out. First of all, I'm your dad. And not cool." I said, "But let me ask you a question." I said, what do we know about Anthony?" And she said, "Well, number one, he's 22. This is his first job. He grew up in Queens. He's got a younger brother and sister." I mean, she was so proud. She was listening to all these things she knew about Anthony. And the last thing she said is, "And he can beat you in basketball." And I said, "You know what? All of those things are accurate except for that one." I said, "No, he cannot." I said, "But isn't that interesting, Caroline?" I said, "We know all of those things about Anthony." I said, "Let me ask you a question. What does Anthony know about us?" And she paused for a second and she said, "This is my first time on the water taxi." Mm-hmm. I said, "What else does he know? Does he know anything else about you?" She said, "No." I said, "Isn't that interesting?" I said, "What do you think caused Anthony to decide to offer his time, his money to take us to the dock? She said, I don't know. You just this manipulation. And I said, no. I said, remember this, and I want you to write this down. The number one human need is recognition. The number one human need is recognition. And as I said that to her, she kind of got off of that, aggressive attack mode.
Thank goodness.
And she said, right?
Yeah.
And she started to listen, but she still was skeptical. And I said, Caroline, I asked the questions of Anthony and discovered all of those things because I really wanted to know. I was interested. I'm really, truly interested in Anthony. Here's this young man who's working a sales job, right? In New York City, probably not the easiest place to do this, right? And yet he's doing it and obviously does it with a lot of energy and enthusiasm. I was curious. And I said, the reason Anthony decided to do that is because we allowed Anthony to tell his story. Everybody has a story to tell. And when you give people an opportunity to tell their story, it gives them an opportunity to feel heard. And when people feel heard, they feel important. And when they feel important, they have a tendency to feel safe. And that's what people want to feel, is safe. They want to feel like it's going to be okay. And when I say okay, meaning that this person in front of me is not an enemy. This person in front of me is a friend. They're not a foe, right? There's somebody who is kind and considerate and is potentially willing to help me. And when I say that, I want you to think about your potential clients, right? Your clients are no different. Their number one human need, your potential clients, their number one human need is what? It's to feel safe and ultimately to feel what? Accepted, important, to be validated. So then the question is, well, how do we do that? Well, number one, we have to what? Ask questions. When you ask people questions, it gives them an opportunity to tell their story. So the key is to ask well-designed questions intended to accomplish a specific outcome. So in the business of real estate, there are two primary questions that I want to give you that I always like to ask when I'm prospecting or when I'm sitting down with either a seller or a buyer. And obviously the words change a bit if I'm talking to a seller versus a buyer, but the gist is the same, okay? So the first question that I always like to ask, and just listen and I can repeat it for you. But the question is this: if I'm talking to a seller, what I will say is, I know you want to sell your home. I mean, that's why we're talking, right? But my question is, what's caused you to decide to sell your home? What's happening next? And by asking that question, it gives them an opportunity to tell their what?
Story.
To tell their story. And if I'm really genuinely interested, if I portray that I am interested genuinely in what it is that they have to say, how are they going to feel? They're going to feel safe. Because see, if you have something to share that's important to you, but nobody asks, you never get the opportunity to share it, then there's no opportunity for you to build any sort of connection with that human being. We build connections based upon the way we feel, ultimately, our emotion. And if you ask somebody questions that give them an opportunity to share with you things that are important with them, and they know that you actually listen and you care about that, what does that do to their perception of you?
A decent human being.
Right, that you care. Yeah. And that's ultimately what people are looking for, somebody who cares, that has their best interests in mind. And that is such a critical point, gang, when we talk about separating ourselves from the competition in real estate. So many real estate agents will think that, well, I'm going to use my sign or my card or my car or the way that I dress and all those things to separate myself from the competition. Well, I'm not saying that those things don't have an impact. They do, but not the sort of impact that ultimately, because those things are superficial and all of those things you can buy. Anybody can buy that. So somebody who is a poor communicator, who doesn't care about people, who has ill intentions, can do all of those things and still not be an effective leader. But then you have the person who maybe doesn't hit the mark on all of those other things, but genuinely cares and is a great communicator, asks great questions, gives people an opportunity to speak. And then that person who asked the questions did what?
Listen.
And the person who was speaking knew that that person was listening, right? Then we build rapport, like, trust, and respect. When we build like, trust, and respect in any relationship, including a business relationship, now we're talking about an opportunity to lead them through a process selling a home, for example. See, when you hear their story and they feel safe, they're going to turn over control to you and say, yes, we want to work with you because we feel what?
Safe.
We feel safe. We know with you, we're going to be okay. We're going to get what it is that we want. So that first question is, what's caused you to decide to sell your home? What's happening next? Really important. Write that down. What's caused you to decide to sell your home? What is happening next? Such a critical question. Now, if it's a buyer, then I'm just simply going to change it a little bit and say, what's caused you to decide to buy a home? What's happening next? So instead of selling, we're buying. Same thing though. What's caused you to decide to buy a home? What's happening next? And I want them to share with me their story. The second question, because remember I said there are two questions that I like to ask both buyers and sellers. Yeah, the second question is, I know that you want to buy a home, or I know that you want to sell a home. That's obvious, right? My question for you is, what is it that you expect me to do as your agent to actually make that happen? What do you believe that I should do? What are the most effective things that I can do as your agent to make certain that I help you get your home sold, or in the case of a buyer, that I help you buy a home? Now, why would I ask a buyer or seller that? Who knows more about the buying or selling process, them or me?
Well,
They think they do, but who ultimately knows more? Yeah, we do, because we're the professionals. But whose opinion at this point is more important? Theirs. Always more important, especially when we don't have any rapport built up, right? We've got to build rapport. We got to show value. So when we allow them the opportunity to express what they believe we should be doing, and we let them know that we listen to what they said, again, what we do is we begin to build rapport, like, trust, and respect. In other words, we begin to meet their number one human need, which is what? To be recognized and to feel safe, right? So share with me, what do you believe that I should be doing? What are the things that you believe I should do in order to get your home sold? Or what are the things you believe that I should do in order to help you find a home? I want them to share with me what they believe. And here's why this is very important. And we're gonna finish on this. I want you to think about this. Think about a past relationship that you have been in, or maybe one that you're in currently. All relationships will break down and eventually fail when expectations are not discovered and not met, or where they are discovered and they are not met. I want you to think about that. Every relationship that you've ever been in that did not work out, it didn't work out because you had a set of expectations in terms of the way that other person was going to behave and the way you were going to feel. And those expectations were not what? They were not met. And so therefore the relationship broke down and it ended. So if you're married, for example, and you have a set of expectations up here and the performance of your partner, your spouse, is down here consistently, you know what they call that gap? Divorce. It's called divorce. Because if that happens consistently where your expectations are not met over months, over years, over decades, it eventually leads to what? Divorce. And it will in any relationship. When expectations are not met, the relationship will break down. Well, gang, these potential clients of yours, do they have expectations? Say yes.
Yes.
They do. I get that you know more about the buying and selling process. You do. But it is really, really critical that you find out what they believe is important. Because whose expectations do you have to meet?
Theirs.
Right. Whose rapport, whose trust do you have to earn?
Theirs.
Right. And in order to do that, you've got to ask great questions that give them an opportunity to share their story, to share their expectations, so that then, therefore, you can behave in ways, specifically communicate in ways that shows them that you're going to meet their what? Expectations. Does that make sense?
Yes.
See, what they're really doing, do you remember when you were in high school or in college, if you did that, and your teacher or professor gave you the opportunity to do a closed book test or an open book test? Which one did you prefer to do, the open or closed?
Open.
Exactly. Why?
The answers are there.
Yeah, the answer's right there. It was easier. I'm giving you the open book test version of taking a listing or getting the buyer to work with you. See, most real estate agents will go into those conversations, the listing presentation or the buyer broker interview, and they go in blind. And they'll go in and they will share all they know, their expertise and all the things that they can do to help the buyer or seller buy or sell a home. And I'm telling you, that's a mistake because they don't know the answers to the test. You have no clue what the expectations are of that buyer or seller. You think you do. Oh, well, they want to buy a home or they want to sell a home. No, they want to feel what? Safe. They want to feel recognized. And the best way to do that is not to make a bunch of statements and talk about you and your company and all the great things that you do and your company does and me and I'm exceptional and listen to me, I'm the expert. No, it's about asking questions, giving them an opportunity to feel important, right? And when they know that you've listened, then all of a sudden you begin to become important to them because you make them feel safe. You position yourself as a leader because great leaders are great communicators. Great communicators ask great questions. Great questions allow people to share their story. And when that happens, the shift is, it's amazing what happens when you go from not having any rapport to within just a few minutes, a complete stranger will take 7 or 8 minutes, give up however much money that Anthony makes on selling a ticket, right? That he obviously needs. He's doing this not because it's a philanthropic endeavor for him. He needs the money, right? And yet he's willing to forego that money because he felt what? Safe and recognized. And your clients, your potential clients are no different. Separate yourself from the competition, not by gizmos and gadgets and things that people can buy, but rather by who you are as a leader, a great communicator who understands the value of asking great questions. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So there were 3 things that I wrote down here just in summary. Recognize and remember the number one human need. Recognize and remember it. Every day that you go out in this business of real estate, recognize and remember the number one human need. It is acknowledgement, validation, helping people feel safe. And then number 2, avoid statements and ask questions. Stop making so many statements and ask more questions. Really want to know. Be more curious. And then the thing that I started with in the beginning, just I said in passing, I said, just like people, like them, and really want to know. But gang, if you don't like people and you really don't want to know, you're in the wrong business. Because real estate has nothing to do with homes. It has everything to do with people.
Yes.
And if you don't get along with people and you're not interested in people, you should find a programmer's job,
Agreed.
right?
Yes.
Very much so.
Yeah. All right. So any thoughts or questions as we wrap this up?
There's no I in team.
There
That's the
you
only
go.
thing I kept thinking in
Yeah.
my head, because it has to be, it's a team effort and the communication is so key, right? So and in order to be a leader, which you are, you have to remember that it's a group effort. And
Right.
so that's where the communication amongst all parties has to happen.
Very good.
Yeah. It's so important if you recognize that the person who's asking questions, ultimately, practically speaking, is in control. They're directing the flow of the conversation. And that's what has to happen. See, if you allow the potential client, the prospect, to do all of the asking of questions, they're directing ultimately the direction of the conversation.
Right.
And they're not the professional. They don't know what's needed. And they're not professional communicators. And so it oftentimes doesn't end up in the direction or a destination that you want it to, right? So you have to recognize you're the leader, you're the expert, you're also the expert in communication. You might say, well, I'm not. Well, you are. That's what you work on in this business, is work on elevating your communication skill. And that when you recognize that, and ultimately that's what you are, you're not a real estate agent, you're a leader. And the number one skill of a great leader is their ability to ask questions, to communicate, to build rapport.
I was gonna say, I like the fact that you said stop making so many statements, because a lot of times we try to sell, not sell.
Yourselves, yeah.
Well,
no.
not ourselves, but more about the company.
Yep.
And it's more like asking questions and then opening the door for them to do the story.
Yep.
So I think that was a good.
And it's okay
I've
at
heard
some,
that differently.
yeah, no, it's great. I'm glad you did. It's okay at some point to make statements,
Sure.
right? But we need to, especially initially, we've got to ask a lot of questions to give people an opportunity to tell their story so that they relax
Yeah.
and that they feel safe. And when they are relaxed and they feel safe, then they're going to give us an opportunity to make more statements. And they're at that point, they're going to be more likely to what?
Listen.
Yeah. You don't have a tendency to listen to people you don't trust.
Mhm. That is
But,
very
but when you trust someone and they make statements, it's like, okay, I'm going to listen.
Yeah.
this makes sense.
Mhm.
They have my best interest in mind, so I better listen and follow through on what it is that they're suggesting.
We
So
just
critical.
all listen to you.
Oh,
Yeah,
you're very
we
sweet.
love listening.
Very sweet.
We're up
Okay.
early and coming here.
All right. Well, having said that, let's finish up with some closing